Thank you very much, Maggie. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I do a lot of herb gardening. I've actually been in Europe to visit herb gardens in Sicily, etc. So some of the pictures you see will be from those areas. It's an easy thing to do. The first step is you have to know what you want to grow, all right, with herbs. And there are all kinds of categories. You can have them for food. You can have them for, this is a wonderful pizza loaded with lots of herbs, or they can be medicinal, all right, such as the lavender over here on the left. And then you can do design with them. And it just gives it, there's all kinds of things. So design is wonderful because you can also eat whatever's in your design as well, or use it for medical purposes. So we're going to focus mostly on the culinary, and I say yum because I absolutely love them. I purchased one of those zero gardens that you have in your home, and there's a LED light up on top, and I've so enjoyed growing my basil and my parsleys, and now I have tomatoes growing there. And when I'm cooking, I just pop things right off of that into whatever I'm cooking. That's the nice thing about having your herb garden inside. All right, it's right there for you. So steps to your herb garden. You have to select the herbs, and then you have to decide whether you want annuals, biennials, or perennials. So if you're looking to put some outside, all right, you can do all three categories, but if you want them to continue to come back, like I have some rosemary that still does, thyme that does, and oregano, those would be in your perennial category. And then there are some that are biennial. They have a first year of growth, and then the next year is when they produce for you. And then of course, annuals. Location can be inside or outside. And we'll go over each of those. And considerations for growing. You want to take a look at the site that you're going to have if it's outside, even the site in your home, and soil and containers if you're going to be using it inside and even outside. And design, formal or informal. There's some absolutely magnificent gardens that are all herbs that are formal gardens. There's one down there in DC at the Franciscan Monastery that is quite lovely. Theirs is a culinary one, but it is also very formal. And then there's informal and maintenance. So general tips, I'll go over some of those, and then some of the pests and diseases and harvesting and preserving your herbs. Here's a huge selection, all right, of annuals and biennials. So we have our basil. Almost everyone loves basil, and borage, cameline, chervil, cilantro, dill, parsley. This particular one, and I can give you copies of this, so if you want to share them with each other and print them off, you don't have to take notes on that, okay? So it gives you hints on where you would grow those, what the sun requirements would be, the soil, the pH. This is where if you're doing them outside, your soil test kit, right, comes into play. And then the uses from tomatoes to teas, soups, salads, all kinds of uses, all right, herbs. And here's some more, catnip, chives. I have echinacea here, but I'm not a real fan of that. I know there's some toxic issues with that, so I wouldn't be running out to do that. Tarragon, which I love, all right, and then lavender for sachets, right? So indoor versus outdoor. Indoor, the advantage is easy access. Like I said, I have them right there on my counter as I cook, by my kitchen sink and by my stove. So I can just pluck what I want when I want. No weeding, right, which is another benefit. And they grow year round, all right, if you have them indoor. You just have to reseed periodically. Outdoor advantages, you get a lot more of the herb itself, and they're much more flavorful, and that's because they've been exposed to the nutrients that are in the soil. You'll have nutrients within the growth medium that you're using inside, but there's nothing like having the wonderful flavors from outside with it. And then outside takes a lot of space, all right, for them. So you have to have that into consideration. I have stands of them in the front of my house that are perennial, And then I also got into putting pots of them. I have a wall. So if you remember my presentation on the side of my house there, and I do put the pots there with herbs as well. And so if you grow them outside, you want to select ones that are hardy, that'll stand up to things. Ones that I suggest are parsley, coriander, dill, cameline. You can use dill, basils, and yes. So some of these are the ones that you could select for outside. Make sure you just read the seed package that you have selected, all right, to do it. And if you get them from a seed exchange, make sure you ask the person that's doing the seed exchange. People that are really good at doing seed exchanges always give you a little explanation of whatever seeds they're providing to you and how to grow them. And I suggest sowing from March until August. That gives you all year, all right, all the summer months to work with them outside. And some you can put right into the soil, which would be chervil and dill. And then some, such as basil, sage, these are more tender, especially chives. I didn't realize how tender chives were. It takes quite a while to get them so that they're healthy enough to go outside, right? But you can start growing them inside initially. And then the idea is to sow them at intervals every 3 to 4 weeks, because your crops will expend themselves and then you'll have the next crop coming in. So all throughout the summer and within your home, you can do the very same thing. Plant them when they start to look a little weepy, all right, then you put in your new plants in your pots, and I rotate those out. You need a dedicated space for your herb garden, especially if it's outside, harvest easily. Again, if you remember my walls, I can walk around and I can pluck all. They were built that way, and then I have the wide paths on them that can also, you can walk along and harvest with it. The other thing is put them someplace where you're going to get to smell them. There's nothing more delightful. I have some of them right underneath my lower deck, so that in the summer when it's warm and whatever, I can smell the oregano and the thyme and all of that. It's just a nice feeling. And you color the leaves to offset the flower colors that you have. They look wonderful. Many of them have delightful flowers that blend in with your own landscaping itself and give texture to the beds that you have. In the autumn, you can dig up those plants that you think are not going to survive. Like my rosemary did not make it this year. Some years it does, sometimes it doesn't. But then you can do that, and you can divide them into clumps and put them in ordinary multi-purpose compost, and make sure you just water them, and then cut that top growth back after they've established themselves to about 10 centimeters, which is about the size of a light switch plate. And then plant herbs back in the garden in the spring. All right. And the idea is treat them like cut, come back again crops. So normally once you get those are in place. Things like dill, what are some of the others? But dill in particular will seed itself. And so you really don't have to worry about planting it back again. Yes.
Can you explain why we're doing this? I mean, I understand this is what you're recommending. But why are we digging these up in the autumn?
Just to have them in place. A lot of them will not make it through. Like the example was the rosemary that didn't make it back. All right. Some of mine are really hardy. Some are not really hardy. Yeah. And you don't have to. All right. You'll have seeds. You can make cuttings of some of these as well. And that saves on space. Good question. And so when you grow them inside, this is where you can use delightful pots, I find, to make sure that you have them. Just put them on the surface of the soil, all right, and make sure that it drains really well. And then I just put a light layer of vermiculite just to hold them in place, and then cover it with either a plastic bag, sometimes saran wrap, or glass. Glass is a little bit more intense because depending on where you have it near the window, there'll be too much heat, and That's not as good. The plastic bag leaves some space for them to grow. In all cases, make sure there's some ventilation underneath that when you're growing them. And then in a nice warm location. You don't want them in some place where it's going to be 80 degrees. 64 to 68 is a good, and everybody has a window that they love to grow things in, at least I do. And then once they're germinated, just remove that cover and then put them in another bright area. And then harvest them often to encourage that growth. Remember, we're talking about plant hormones. And once you clip the top of that, all right, all those hormones that were going to the tip of the plant, all right, can go down and give you an embellishment of leaves with your basil and with your parsleys and such. Even the chives will regenerate themselves. So again, these can be treated like cut and come again crops. And these you also want to circulate, you know, once you see them start to grow, you want to put another crop in there. All right, mine lasts probably about 2-3 months, and then I'll put in another crop. And growing sites, it's nice to have a dedicated herb garden. I live in a community where I'm not supposed to be growing this sort of thing, but I tell them they're not for food necessarily, they're for enhancement and decorations, part of my garden design. All right. So I think this looks like a wonderful garden design. All right, that you have. I have a friend who's in gritty fingernails, and she just grows wonderful sites. This is one of hers, and she has this out in her backyard. It's a lovely little place. And you can see the one that's the cochlea, looks like a snail down there on the parsley. That's another thing that you can build. And that's really a lot of fun to do. And so your housing foundation can't complain about that either. Raised beds, you can have those as well. Here's one. And if you're in a housing area, you can have those raised beds as silt, but then make sure you put wonderful, you know, annual flowers around them so they're not quite so visible as being a raised bed, but you can still get to them. Some of you may be able to have vegetable plots. All right, Fairfax County has several places where you can grow those types of things. And then they can be within flower borders. This one is showing you some of those as well. That's the garden plot. And this is the borders up here on the right. They look lovely, all right? And now again, the smells and the colors that they bring to them are lovely to do. So you can make yourself a little site map and decide what you want it to look like, and then change it every year, right? Site and soil, you want a sheltered location and sunny. And you want, because we have those clay soils, you want to incorporate some well-rotted manure or compost, recycled green waste, whatever you normally use, anything organic that will help get that crop growing for you. And the big thing is make sure there's good drainage. They don't like their feet wet. Right? And especially when you're watering them, make sure you don't overwater. And if you're doing them outside, the raised beds are the best to ensure the drainage. And if you recall my home, all right, that one side yard is just a giant hill that goes down. So anything that's there has good drainage, all right? The pH, again, you might want to do a soil test kit here, all right? You want it neutral to alkaline. And most herbs will tolerate a slightly acidic soil. And some, if it's very acid, make sure you add some lime to sweeten it up a bit. And these are some sites that you might want to consider. Coastal gardens, if any of you have a home, all right, over on the shore. These are wonderful ones to grow. They're salt tolerant, the rosemary, sage, thyme, lavender, and they smell so good, all right? And then shade lovers, of course, love the moist soil. And these are your parsleys, your meadowsweet. Mint only in a container, never put it out unless you want to have a whole yard of mint. Lemon balm and chives, okay, are excellent for the shade. And containers, choose relatively deep pots with drainage holes, especially for large shrubbery things like bay trees and rosemary, all right? You can get very large containers, even those whiskey barrel ones for outside are good for that. And if it's in a shelter location, they'll stay, all right? My son's mother-in-law has an amazing stand of rosemary that she's had for decades in one of those, and it's in a very sheltered area. It's a good idea to raise them up on bricks so that they have feet, so you have that drainage. a loam-based compost, and then feed them regularly a balanced fertilizer throughout the growing season. Make sure you take a look at the label. I don't add too much fertilizer. I'm much more of, I don't overdo it, all right? So, you know, use that at your discretion. And then just importance of watering them, right? The ones I have on my cooking area, my prep area, they have to be watered almost every day. All right, they just suck it up. They're grown hydroponically, the ones I have there. And then you need to protect the pots, all right? During icy weather, you put them up against the wall, or you can wrap them in bubble wrap. And I have pots all over. I used to bring them all in. I have way too many. So I just cover them in bubble wrap, okay? Just like I do my fairy garden for the winter. And if you want, you can plant these invasive ones, but make sure they're in containers. This would be sweet woodruff and mint, ones like that. And general tips, all right, for care. Again, here I am, water and feed routinely, especially if they're in pots. Trim your herbs, all right? They like to be trimmed. They get much more bushier, and you get a healthy growth of leaves, all right, for that. When you see those little blossoms like on basil, make sure you clip those tops. Don't let them go into flower, because that'll, again, create that bushiness on the sides. And again, it's just moving all the hormone growth down. And shrubby herbs such as lavender and thyme after they flower, all right? These are also, especially the thyme is really nice in between stepping stones, because as you step on, it's pretty hardy. As you step on that, you can smell the thyme, all right, as you go through. So it's a lovely one for there. And it also makes for easier flower removal when you do it that way. Any dead foliage on the plant, it's like anything. You want to get all that litter away. If there's anything beneath it, you want to get the litter away, because it becomes a habitat for pests, right? And this will help protect it throughout the winter, of course. And debris, I just mentioned that, but just you know, be a great gardener and make sure you tend all of your plants, because you don't want any fungus, you don't want any gaps in their formation, any of that. And mulch sparingly, if at all. I don't mulch my herbs, all right? But that's up to you. This is a list of the pests and diseases, which I'll gladly share with you, all right? All right. And every one of them has somebody that loves to come visit. And you can see that aphids are a primary one that you're fighting all the time, and whitefly. And of course, downy mildew and all of that. In your home, it's a lot easier to control, all right? Outside, not so easy, but everybody has a pest that loves them. And then I cannot recommend home grounds and animals. This is the link, and I'll make sure you get that link, all right? This is like the Bible for master gardeners. It has all kinds of ways to treat your pests that come into your garden, gives other types of hints. It's just an amazing guide, and it's free in an Adobe PDF online. And you can just Google Virginia Tech Home Grounds and Animals 2022, and it pops right up for you. And you can either store it as a PDF file, or if you need paper, you can actually do it that way. But I have to warn you, it's a huge document. But that's put out by the Virginia Cooperative Extension. Excellent, excellent resource. And so when you harvest them, all right, you can harvest any of these before the plant flowers. And early morning really is best if you're doing it outside. After the dew dries, about 10 to 11 is very good before you have all that heat. And avoid washing the leaves, as that strips some of their aromatic oils, all right? They should be all right for you when you're bringing them in. And herb flowers such as cameline and borage, before their flowers fully open, all right? And you'll get to understand that once you watch them grow. And seed pods from the fennel and dill, caraway, again, they're just lovely, all right? That smell is gorgeous. And then dig up the roots of golden seal, ginseng at the end of the summer, early autumn. They don't do well in the soil if you decide to take care of them. And then basil, all of these, just prune, 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 and they just grow so much better. That's why I have them right there by my, on my prep area in the kitchen. I use those all the time, all right? Just a delightful. And any perennials you want to cut back to their height without any issue. And then stop harvesting and pruning these mint and sage and thyme by September. Annuals you can continue until the first frost to do, but the others you want to just stop and allow them to put any growth if they're going to have down into the roots if they're going to come back up for you the next year. And then short-term storage, you can take any of these, okay? Basil, cilantro, and other long stem herbs, thyme, rosemary, chives. For the cilantro net, just trim the herbs with a diagonal cut like you do your flowers. You can put them in water, they'll root. And you can have them growing there. You can actually put them in the soil later. You can cut them, put them in plastic bags for flow, but that only lasts so much time. I actually put them in the cool area of my fridge when I do that one. And you can refrigerate them up to a week. Right? And with the herbs, of course, you would change the water daily, just like you do your cut flowers. You don't want those on in that to grow all kinds of nasty stuff. And then chives, again, you can wrap those in a damp towel, place them in a perforated plastic bag in a vegetable bin. You can actually take those and freeze them too. Maybe I've got that in long term, I do. All right, so long-term storage, you can dry them if you're up into that, all right? And that's nice too, if you have an area in your kitchen or out in your garage or your basement, you just hang them root side up and tie them and let them dry. And there are all different ways that you can do that. That's a drying rack that you're seeing right there. And you can also freeze them. For the drying, just want ones like thyme or dill, rosemary, sage, those that I have low moisture. High moisture ones won't do well, all right, like basil. So you cut the whole branch and just rinse it in cool water. And then, as I said, just hang them up in small bunches in a dark, well-ventilated area. And 2 to 3 weeks, remove the leaves and plant in an airtight container, all right? And then high moisture herbs with tender leaves like basil, remove the best leaves, right? And place those in a single layer to dry. All right, so what you're doing is you're making these into ones that you would actually purchase at the store, all right? And dry those as well. And then the air should be able to circulate around with them. You don't want those in the sun. And during the first few days, you'll turn those leaves so that the drying process is equal on both sides. And once they're dry, about a week, put those in airtight containers. And you don't really have to do much more after that, all right? Because those are dried. If the leaves turn black or develop a mold, get rid of the whole batch because something's happened. You've gotten some moisture in there, all right? Freezing, herbs freeze well, all right? If I had, when I purchase them, if I need a lot of them from the Giant or whatever, I just keep them in that plastic bag and throw them in the bottom of my freezer. And then when I want them, I use them. You still have the aromatic properties and all the things that you're seeking in those when you freeze them. I think the pandemic made me much more aware of how you can conserve and take care of foods. I don't have as much spoilage as I used to have, all right? Just make sure they're dry and clean. All right, and then this is the cookie layer thing again, all right? And then you put them in the freezer. And after they're frozen, there you go. They're ready to use anytime you want. So basil, the ways you can, there's all kinds of basil. Asian, there's sweet. And these are just some of the places that you can use these wonderful things. Sweet is the Genovese. That's the one that's being attacked by the blight quite a bit. But pesto, there are others that you can do. Ensalada caprese. All right, I've got lots of wonderful Italian dishes. And when I make my spaghetti sauce, I always use all the fresh herbs and the taste is remarkable. And when I have the fresh tomatoes, I use those as well. This year, I didn't have a bumper crop with those. And then, of course, in Asian dishes, they're very popular as well. And cilantro, I do not like cilantro, but if you like it, there are lovely places to put it in. All right. And just depends on all the places that you want to do with it. Okay. Parsley, I put parsley everywhere, even in my eggs. I think it tastes great. And soups. And then the curly and the flat. The flat is the Italian. That one I use more in my sauces, eggs, and the soups. I think it brings out a different flavor. I use the curly when I'm doing a garnish, unlike the carrots and some of the others, but it tends to be whatever your flavor and taste you like. Taste each one. They each have a little bit different flavor. And then rosemary, you can use anything for rosemary. Oh my gosh, it just goes on. And if you've got a really good stand of rosemary, you can cut the woody ones, and then you can use those as skewers for your beef or your chicken or your shrimp. And as you barbecue those, that flavor goes into your meat or fish, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful taste. Okay, so these are all the other things that you can use them for. And then oregano, I love oregano, and I love it on subs and on pizzas, and of course my sauces. And that's another one. Some people, use it sparingly, but I think it is just an amazing one. And this one grows back year after year. It's a very hardy herb. And thyme, with porks, especially chicken types of meats, soups, some soups, and butters and spreads. You can use all of these, okay? Even the rosemary and the thymes. And what else do I use? Sometimes the parsley with inside butters, I'll melt those, and then it's just a special butter taste that you have, all right, with it. Lightly, making me hungry here, right? So just enjoy your herb garden, okay?